Dumont is unable to make it this evening. Kashi?
Here.
Hussey?
Here.
Stu is unable to make it tonight. Knowles?
Here.
Lambert?
Here.
White?
Here.
And Williams.
Here.
Just doing roll call.
The Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the minutes. Could I have a motion to accept the minutes of the January 7th, 2021 board meeting? It has been moved by Heather, seconded by Ray, to accept the minutes of the January 7th, 2021 board meeting. Any discussions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Ten. All those opposed? Zero. Abstain? One. Citizens input. This is the time if anyone from the audience wants to stand up and address the board, you're more than welcome to. Moving on. Old business, school construction project update.
So this is, evening is on the heels of 2 nights of public forum, where it was not very well attended, I expect, due to our COVID environment. The first night we had about 12 people participating, and maybe half dozen the next evening, but John was able to record the evening's events, and our architects did a great job of explaining their findings to the public, and they moved on to talking about what 21st century education looks like and some of the possibilities as far as the facility goes and the programming that can take place inside those buildings. And then they spent some time with a question and answer period with those people who were able to participate, recorded the questions, and those will all be posted up. We intend to have a Zoom meeting scheduled so people will be able to participate virtually, and that will be coming up very soon, where the architects will have a live chat open, and hopefully we'll have more people participate. But that was just the first of many meetings that we are intending to hold with the public and engage the community in conversations about what our hopes for this project and what we would like to see for programming and facilities for our students. We are, as you see in the materials, CHA provided us with a timeline, which is a nice graphic, I think, laying out the steps before us. And we are in the infancy of this, the initial phase. They've completed their analysis, and they're talking about next steps. One of the immediate needs is for the firm and I to meet with the Department of Education and plan out moving forward a timeline for renovation or replacement. And that's a decision that we'll have to make. I think they've established that the renovation of the Fairfield Primary School is not at all feasible, and they have their recommendations. And then the issue of consolidation, is that something that the community wishes to happen? Site selection will follow that. So there are important steps in place, but before any of that occurs, one of the subcommittees that the building committee will establish is a committee that will look at educational specifications and involve many of our staff families and students in regard to what are the identified needs for the students of the school district and what is possible in the replacement of an elementary school. We had our first building committee meeting, and I thought that was very helpful and productive. We have a good team moving forward here. But again, we're moving ahead with establishing that ed programming specifications committee very soon. As far as communication goes, on our banner page, we had put up where people might access registering for those forums, but there is now a dedicated email for questions that the public may have, and we'll find a way to call attention to that. I'll probably send out a school messenger robocall. We've added a tab on the banner page of the school district, which will house all the information that we have, including an FAQ that we're going to establish and continue to add to, but just continually soliciting public input. The recorded sections will be out. I think John is a little bit to YouTube. Those should be live links tomorrow, I hope. And I don't know if any of the building committee members want to add to our discussion. We're going to meet monthly initially in these early phases of it. Do you have any questions?
No, thank you. Moving on, school-based health center project presentation. I know that this was brought up last year and it was addressed to the board to go forward with this. And this group has been meeting for the past year. So I'm going to introduce Elaine Richard, and she's going to introduce the rest of the group. But I know Stu has been working with them, and he's not here, of course, but I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have been up to for the past year.
Hello? Yeah. Thank you for having us here tonight. I know it's kind of difficult with things and how things are going, but I think you'll be really happy to hear the progress that we've made on the school-based health center. There's been an awful lot that's gone on since we've been here last, and the pandemic is, of course, top and foremost, but we have been meeting once a month and have established a really good working, exciting relationship with Health Reach Health Centers. And tonight, Connie Kogans, who is the CEO there, is going to present the proposal that they have for the district for a school-based health center at Lawrence High School. But I just want to point out the people who are here who are on the committee: Deanna Turlow, Shannon King, Deandra Staples, and Connie Kogan. Also, Patricia Watts, Stu Kinley, and Keely Tinkham, who can't be with us tonight, which is on the phone, if anyone has any questions for her. So I don't want to talk anymore. I'd like Connie just to come and give you the presentation.
Appreciate being here tonight, and just to give you a little background about Health Reach Community Health Centers, we've been a community health center since 1975, and we have 11 locations scattered throughout central and western Maine, one of which is in your service area, our Lovejoy Health Center, right across from your Albion Elementary School. But we have health centers as far south as Richmond and as far north as Rangeley. And part of our process last year was in 2019, we engaged in a strategic planning process. And one of the things our data showed is that it's really difficult to connect with adolescents in the healthcare setting. And so part of our board's strategic plan was to, look for ways to better engage adolescents. And one of the strategies that was outlined in our strategic plan was to find a partner to pilot a school-based health center. So instead of, kind of working with the parents and the kids to bring them to our health centers, we would bring services to, where the kids are at. So, and it was really fortuitous because shortly after that strategic planning process, we were approached by the community group from the school because they were interested in starting a school-based health center, and that's when we began meeting. So you should have gotten our proposal. Tonight we're here to ask the board to make a motion to move forward with a school-based health center pilot, basically at first offering primary care services next fall, in September of 2021. I can imagine a couple questions are crossing your mind. First, I want to let you know that our board, the Health Reach Community Health Center Board, has approved our participation in this pilot, of course, subject to your approval to move forward. And I know it's a difficult time to consider doing something else, given all the issues with, the pandemic. But I imagine you're trying to strike the balance just like our organization is in dealing with the COVID pandemic day to day, but not setting aside long-term goals. We did include a budget at the end, and I want to cut to the chase because I know that funding is a challenging area. And what we did with the budget is we estimated both visit volume and income based on some data that had come from the state's analysis of other school-based health centers. And that's really the best we could do. And you'll notice it's a deficit budget. But the point I want to make first, before we kind of talk about how it might work, is that Health Reach will shoulder that deficit. We intend to go after some grant funding, so really what we're asking the school for in kind is, a space to provide the services, Wi-Fi connection so we can connect to our electronic record, and of course, the in-kind contribution of time and collaboration, which we've already started through this process over the last year. So we're not expecting a financial commitment from the school. We intend to go after foundation money, and I was actually on a Health Resources and Services Administration call. That's our federal grant funder, and they intend to put out a grant for school-based health centers, which we would go after if your board approved moving forward. So the way things would work is permission slips would go home with kids, and if the parents consented, then we would have that ability to see the students during the day in the school-based health center. There are some services that by law in the state of Maine, an adolescent can consent to without parental consent, such as substance abuse services or reproductive health services. So we would follow all the guidelines that are out there in the state of Maine now. The student would be a patient of our school-based health center. If they had a primary care clinician in the community and we saw them for some sort of acute need, we would send a note to that primary care clinician to keep the communication smooth and alive. And then we would bill the insurance of the parent, and that would be the revenue stream for the health center. We wouldn't collect any money from the student. We do have an affordable care program, which is a sliding fee discount program based on family size or income that we would offer to the family. And ultimately, we would not refuse care to anyone who could not afford to pay. That's the mission of community health centers. So you should have our proposal. In the proposal, we kind of gave a brief history of Health Reach, a bit of background on how we connected with the team here from the school, also a little bit about the nationwide perspective. Many community health centers nationwide are involved in school-based activities, and we've actually joined the School-Based Health Center Alliance to kind of further our knowledge about those activities. And then there's the meat of the proposal and then the budget. Again, the budget's an estimate. Using that data is what we had available. We really don't have a good idea because it would be based on how many students use the health center and to be able to project. But again, that will be shouldered by Health Reach Community Health Centers. So I don't know if there's questions. I don't actually know how much time was allotted for this, but I'm very open to answering questions that you may have. Yes.
Just for disclosure for the board, I used to be the director of finance at Outreach. So I know, and I'm very familiar with the organization. Do you have to apply to HRSA for a new site?
We do. We do. We have to apply 120 days before the initiation of services. But it would be another site, just like one of our 11 health centers. The way HRSA views it is because we would be controlling the health services offered within that infrastructure, then we have to register that as one of our sites.
On your page 6 there, where you have your budget, it may be me, but I'm a little confused. What are you estimating for the visit volume for Lawrence High School? I see a lot of numbers here, but I don't.
Sure. I can walk
And
you
it may be me, maybe you just can't glean it out of here.
Yeah, I can walk you through it. So we used the school from, the data from the Muskie School. They did the analysis for statewide community health centers. I have to admit there was quite a lot of variation in that data, so we used the average. So in school year 2021 to 2022, we're estimating that there would be 150 visits at the school-based health center. And that would yield a certain level of revenue. Again, we use the payer mix from the Muskie School data because, again, we don't know what that will look like. And then we had our expenses listed, some of which are one-time costs in year one, such as the laptop, licensure for our EMR, an exam table. And then some of those expenses disappear in year two because they're one-time expenses. And so we come up with, in year one, a net deficit of $33,000, almost $34,000. At the bottom, we've listed some of our visit volume because our intent, this would be a part-time role for one of our clinicians. So it's our intent to hire that person at our Belgrade Regional Health Center so they'd spend part of their time at the school and the rest of the time at the health center. So you'll see an estimate of their visits for our fiscal year at the bottom of the page, because our fiscal year runs from January to December. And then you'll see those visits grow in year two. But part of the way we could fund this position is by the revenue generated also at the Belgrade Regional Health Center. Does that help?
I guess what I'm still asking is, obviously the visitor volume down at the bottom talks about 318, but isn't that including Belgrade?
The 318 is Belgrade, and the 40 is the school-based health center for our fiscal year. So that would be from September to December of 2021. What we expect for the school year is at the top of the page, simply for the school, would be from September till, you dismiss students in June of 2022 would be about 150 visits.
Thank you.
I have a question. How many days a week are you expecting this clinician to be here?
It would be a minimum of 2 mornings a week and perhaps as much as 3.
So you also mentioned about applying for some grants,
Yes.
so that would help cover some of the costs above, maybe one-time costs, or, and those usually, is that what we were talking about, they have to, that grant has to be in about 120 days before you start the process, or, because I know when we talked about this last year, I think it was around this time that we had to get something going with the grant writing, or?
Right, so our intent, and we didn't include that in the budget because we don't know if that's going to be a known or if it's going to come to fruition. But we intend to
There's also state money that's going to be available, and we've talked about that through this whole process because the state has delayed the announcement of the availability of those funds. So we expected it to happen anytime this whole past year, and it hasn't happened yet. We're now told it should happen in the next couple of weeks, so we'll continue to watch for that. The state funding is just a portion of school-based health center funding, and has historically been that way. In Maine, we've been funding school-based health centers for 30 years. And it's varied over time in terms of the proportion of state money that they give. So in addition to what Connie's talking about at the federal level, we're looking to apply for those state funds once they become available, and those funds will be competitive, but we will go for those just like some foundation funding, just like, any other funding that we can get to piece a full school-based health center together.
And that's really why we're here tonight, because we really can't move forward with any of those grant funding initiatives till we know that your board is on board with the idea of moving forward and establishing an MOU. The position at Belgrade would also be a new hire for us, and so if we wanted to have a clinician ready in place by September, we would need to begin our recruitment efforts in March or April. So we're kind of at a juncture where timing is very important.
So I know when we talked about this last year, one of the concern was the space and where this was going to be housed. And I think we did have space in mind, or is that space still available? And things probably changed. We do. Okay. So make sure we have space.
For some of the new board members who weren't here last year, could you explain to them and to us, like, the amount of space you're going to need for the school-based health center?
Basically, we're going to need a room that can function as an exam room. And then probably a desk for either like a coordinator or support person as well. But it doesn't have to be a large area. We've talked about, do you want to?
We talked about a couple of spaces at the school. For those who don't know who I am, I'm the school nurse at Lawrence High School. So right now, it just so happens that because of the pandemic, they took some space right across the hall from my office and created it to be my isolation room. And I expect at some point I won't need an isolation room, and that would be a fantastic place for an office because it's got a sink and a bathroom, and it's got an exam table in there already that's you probably want a better one, but it's got an exam table, and there's another space close by there that could be used as an office if that's what we decide we want to do. There are a few other spaces around the school that we have considered as well, but it was just kind of figuring out where and what would be the best place. I like the space across from my office because I'm right there. I mean, I'm 10 steps away from them, so it would be a really good space.
So do you feel comfortable with that? I mean, because you and I and some other people went to visit Francourt and saw their space.
Yep.
So do you feel comfortable with what we have?
Yes, as long as I'm not sure what the Brailleist room is being used for when we don't have a Brailleist in the school. That's one of the spaces that I'm thinking of for the office. But, I mean, we have other spaces too that we can consider, a few spaces in the junior high that aren't being used right now that might be a possibility as well. So, moving forward, I think we would have to for sure nail that down, but I know that there's space available, so it's just a matter of deciding where it would be.
I will just say that, like I said, Dee and I visited Francourt for the last year.
I think it was 2 years, maybe.
Whatever it was. And it was very impressive, and I was very impressed. They had been in operation for many, many years, so they were very well established, but they spoke very highly of the quality of it, and they continued to do it, so I think it's warranted.
I make a motion that
centers for a pilot project for a school-based health center at Lawrence High School.
And it's been moved by Jenny and seconded by Beth to, let's say it again, Jen?
To engage with Health Reach Community Health Centers to establish a pilot project for a school-based health center at Lawrence High School.
Is there any discussion? I just want to say when this was first brought to the Education Programs Committee, however long ago, I think it's a great way to keep the kids or the high school students, adolescents engaged in their own health needs. And I think it's really important for this community, for the kids that may not have transportation or may not have the means to get to a healthcare provider. So I think it's a really great service. All right, all those in favor? Um, 11. Anyone opposed? None. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Yes. Before I move on, thank you again, everyone, for all the time and energy and effort you put into this. So moving on, school board priorities. Beth was unable to make it last time, so was on the agenda. I believe her notes that were on it, actually that was for everyone. And, sorry, Jenny, I don't have one. So the board approved the finance facilities and instruction, and negotiations that had added the culture and climate piece to the board priorities, and I just wanted to give her an opportunity to explain.
Sure. Thanks, Danielle. So, yeah, I apologize that when you talked about this, I had a family emergency that I had to attend to with my kid, but, so after reading through it, the finance facilities instruction and negotiations are pretty straightforward, but one of the themes that continually has come up before I joined the board and in the 2 years on it has been around school culture and climate, and it's sort of been the thread that's run through a lot of the conversations since coming on board. So for me, it seemed like something that should be a priority that we start to address as we go through the sort of every year activities that the board goes through. And not forget about that as we undertake a new construction project and all the other pieces that we're looking at. So I just put down some ideas in the document that Diana had shared, which you're all looking at. So I don't know if you want to discuss them or if they're straightforward. But it's basically asking that we do some work to create an action plan to address the culture and climate issues that seem to be here in the school districts.
Does anyone have any thoughts or questions? I know that a lot of the notes that were taken, or Beth had written down, some of the steps have been taken specifically in the negotiations. Yeah, sorry, committee, and in negotiating with the associations. I guess my question, Beth, is, are we talking about all employees, making sure that culture and climate?
Yeah, I get it with negotiations. I also think there's a real, I would caution for changing culture through negotiation. I think that it sets a tone that is not maybe necessarily what we want to, that really digs at the culture when you have to do it at a negotiating table versus sort of a more collaborative, cooperative program process that we can do together and think about, yeah, it's everyone. It's families, it's community members, it's teachers, it's, you know, it's the school, a school district, and this school district in our town touches everyone, and, you know, we're all stakeholders in that, and so, yeah, it would be, this is to be something more than what we would use in negotiation, I would hope.
No, I was just asking that question because I know for Sue and I, we've spent a lot of time trying, especially through talking with the associations through this COVID pandemic, a lot of time in trying to resolve some of this. And I know we've put into place, specifically with the Teachers Association, oh God, that just, the committee, sorry, I just went out of my head, everyone. Thank you. Professional Discussions Committee, I think you guys are meeting now, so does anyone else have anything to say or questions?
I would just add to that today, I think that's a really good example is, you know, there's a need for that kind of setup for there to be negotiations and professional conversations so that as issues arrive, you can address them as they're there. And what I'm asking for that we consider as a priority is an undertaking of something that would be larger to hopefully address some of the maybe underlying policies or beliefs or whatever, the culture that's happening to undo that so that the things that lead to the need for conversations around negotiations to address immediate concerns hopefully would alleviate some of those and start to change or address what that culture really is, because I don't think that oftentimes those kind of things will address right now, this is a need, this is an issue that's happening, you know, more time in classrooms or less time or whatever it is at the time. We should always have mechanisms in place to address those things. I don't dispute that at all. But I just think that this, like I said, it continually comes up under everything that we discuss here, that if we could maybe take a step back and take time to really look at it and address it and involve everyone who are stakeholders that want to be involved in that and see what we can do. It takes time. It's not like 3 meetings and we'll present something and there'll be an answer. It's something that I think, you know, either we do as a full board or the subcommittee breaks off to sort of really work and dig into this over time to, you know, with, you know, collaboration obviously with leadership and everyone in the school to really look at and get us to a place where we feel really, you know, and the board as well. I think, you know, like we've talked, these things have all come up and it just seemed like the overarching piece that underpins everything is the climate that we're in here and have been for a few years now.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion that we accept the updated board priorities as presented?
Second.
Jenny has, a motion has been made by Jenny and seconded by Sarah to approve the updated board priorities. Discussion. I think the only suggestion that I have personally is that the Finance and Facilities Committee will meet next time, February 4th. I think it's February 4th. Superintendent's report.
I just wanted to update the board on this next round of federal funds through ESSER 2. We have not, the state has not published that allocation as the last time I looked, but I understand that that may be available as early as tomorrow. We have through September 2023 to expend these funds, and these funds are meant to support schools in mitigating the impact of COVID in our buildings. And there are two purposes specified in particular that we are meant to use the funds for. And one has to do with student services, and our ed programming committee, policy committee discussed some of those in part as what the high school is initially doing to address students' loss of learning and the failure to earn credits and stay on track with graduation. Some examples are, and I mentioned this at the last meeting, creating the logistics in the school days to support more access to courses and moving to a 5x5 schedule. But also some of the things that we could utilize these funds for would be to pay for extended school day, extended school year, and hiring staff to help students recoup those losses and make up and keep them on track to graduate on time. So it's paying personnel, it might be paying for some materials, it would be paying for transportation in the way of a lake bus that we have not had available to our students for a number of years. These are some examples of what these funds can be utilized for. Another part of the process, once our allocation is made public, we will be submitting an application, as we've done for all those other federal funds that have come our way for CRF 1 and 2, and the initial ESSER fund, the funds that we received to establish and operate day programming in partnership with the Alphonse Center. But one of the things that we need to do before we determine what our needs are is complete a needs assessment. So in the buildings, principals are soliciting from staff what their needs are, instructional and resource-wise, to best serve students, and what staff are identifying as needs that the children have, the barriers that are getting in the way from them making progress academically. And it could be related to curriculum and that kind of programming need, but we also know that there are deep effects in the social emotional realm that we're needing to address, and we will continue to need to address those. So one of the supports that we could have in place is bringing in perhaps social workers. We do have an agreement currently with Maine Behavioral Health where we have some social workers in the elementary buildings on a case-by-case basis where they're working with clients where the school is providing a space, much like the school-based health center model. But we would maybe move a step forward in employing this service provider to address the needs of all students and maybe not a limited number of clients. So those are some examples of what we can use the funds for. And we know that as far as a loss of learning in that gap, it's complex, and we know that at different instructional levels there'll be different needs, but I think another utilization of the funds would be technology. I'm thinking of just an assessment tool using the NWEA, paying for a subscription for that. continuing to do that, to assess in real time where students are at, and offering some remedial response to that in the way of interventions will help our staff. Utilizing the funds for professional development, and these will be the things that staff are going to identify what their needs are, and how we can best support them in delivering the service to students. Hardware needs, software needs. So we have a significant amount of money that I believe will be of great use. The other piece to this, and we're looking for one-time investments. And subscriptions are great, but things that we can materially own and have hold of. You know, for example, we have a new marquee sign out in the entry of the junior high. If you have not noticed that, your federal funds pay for that. We are looking to, address the issue that we had here in the junior high with the failed sewer line, which affected the quality of air, it affected the bathroom availability, and it also affected the nurse station that we set up there, the 2 rooms that were totally demolished. Those funds can be used in part to support that. We're talking about a school-based health center and moving forward with that, using the funds to, engage in, some capital improvement projects that we will have and continue to use the facility for, regardless of programming that may or may not be there. Scott Washburn has scheduled engineers from Siemens to assess our buildings, because one of the major needs during this environment is improved ventilation. We certainly learned that from CHA, air quality, and how buildings and systems are constructed today, and how they can be modified and adjusted, are way ahead of where we are in these facilities. And we do know that it's very expensive to retrofit a facility for these sorts of projects. So we have a longer period of time to expend the money, but ideally we would want to move ahead as soon as possible, and likely most of this work would take place in the summer months when the school buildings are closed. But part of the process is soliciting from staff what their identified needs are, and then working with plan operation needs, and trying to find a way to get students back on track and improve the air quality and health and safety of our buildings. As I outlined in several meetings, we've used these funds, PPE, we've used these funds to purchase school buses and mini buses. We've improved the ventilation in the annex with a heat and air ventilation system that wasn't there before. So we have a great opportunity to complete some pretty pricey capital improvement projects. So in that way, it's a gift, but being sure that we aim the money at the mitigation of COVID, because in the application in each of the projects we submit, we need to identify how this mitigates COVID. And in the last round of this particular type of grant, we had to identify from the 6 points, I think, in the main DOE framework of what this project will address to mitigate that part of the impact of COVID. So those are some ideas that we'll have. I'll be meeting with Scott tomorrow morning. I've met with Lori Faulkner in regard to technology and hardware needs that I think one-time purchases in the way of, as we're talking about, interactive boards. We had some requests in our local budget as we're building this. I think 4 to 6 science teachers had requested these, but looking at some technology that maybe we could purchase for every classroom across the district. We we have the resource to do that, and it would be something that we have. So those are some of the ideas we have. Scott and I, again, will be following up with Siemens, and will likely be bringing this to the next financial facilities committee meeting to talk about some of the bigger scale projects that we have in mind.
Thank you, Roberta. Does anyone have any questions for her? Right. Moving on, other business. There is a correction. It's not freshman basketball, it's 8th grade basketball. So 2021 co-curricular directors, advisors, and coaches, no motion necessary. Lawrence Junior High School boys 8th grade basketball, Ryan